Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. This is our last festive masterclass of the year, and I can't think of a better place to end the year than doing a masterclass at the Financial Times, one of our longest-standing partners, who've been a huge support to Creative Access during our partnership. We've now been going for 10 years, so it's absolutely brilliant to be here tonight. Special thank you to all of the FT team for putting on this event and hosting us, especially to Abby and Adele and John and all of our panelists. And I'll hand over in a minute to John and then Abby to do introductions. But I just wanted to say a few words about Creative Access, because I imagine most of you have heard of us, or you won't be sat in this room tonight, but perhaps you might not know in more detail about our mission and some of the work that we do. So if you don't, we are a not-for-profit, and our mission is all about opening up access to careers and supporting career progression for people from underrepresented groups, and that's in terms of ethnicity, in terms of disability, and in terms of social background. So please, if you are looking to break into journalism or any other area of the creative industries, please follow us on our socials, register on our jobs board. There are lots of amazing roles, and you're going to hear about quite a few of them, different areas tonight. And do follow along on the conversation at #CA Masterclass, or join the conversation tonight and really be part of that. So hope you really enjoyed tonight's event, and without further ado, I'll hand over to John, who's the Chief Product and Technology Officer at the FT, and he's going to tell you a bit more about his role. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I say a big welcome to the FT? And can I also say Merry Christmas, everyone? It is Christmas season. I thought I would just talk a little bit about the FT by talking about what I do, but also why I work for the FT. And there are 3 reasons why I work for the FT. So first is its mission to hold power to account and gold standard journalism, seen in awesome articles, 2 which really stand out for me over my tenure at the FT. One is the Wirecard story. So if you haven't read about the Wirecard story, do look it up on FT. But if you alternatively go to Netflix, because there is an awesome movie called Scandal, and it will take you through the whole story, which really exemplifies our newsroom. And the other story, which really made a mark on me, was one about the President's Club. So Google FT President's Club. And I'm sure all of you will find inspiration from that story. The second reason why I work for the FT is because I love my team. I run product and technology, and I sit on the board. Product and technology is all around us in everything we do. This here is product and technology. That's my team putting that screen up. But so is FT.com, one of the world's fastest news websites. And so is a whole myriad of different products which we produce, both tooling in the newsroom through to data science models predicting future behaviors. I'm blessed to have a team of over 530 people. It covers everything from user researchers through to designers, from designers through to developers, from developers through to data scientists, and from data scientists through to cybersecurity experts. They all work for me, and all of them bring their whole selves to their jobs, and all of them buy into that editorial mission, which is at the center of everything we do. But the third reason is probably the most important reason to me. I think life is all about love, and loving the place you work is important, as it's where you spend most of your time. When you love the thing you do, you will be successful. I am sure in that. And I love the FT because I love its culture. It gives me a sense of purpose, and it makes me feel like I belong here. I actually am reasonably old, as you can tell by my attire. I grew up in a small town. I was a gay kid, and it was very lonely, and you were quite excluded, and you were described or what you were or part of your identity was commonly described as a sin. I work for the FT. I feel proud of who I am, and I feel proud that the FT let me bring myself to work and my full self. It has been a journey for me, but the FT have let me make that journey. But it's not just about me, it's about diversity more generally across our different employee groups, which you will hear about today, making sure that everyone can contribute and everyone has their own special, unique superpowers to bring into their work. And that is what gets me up every morning, wanting to do a 2-hour commute to get to the office. So welcome again. We have a great panel, and I'm going to hand over now, I think, to Abby.
I feel a certain amount of pressure now to say I love the FT, which of course we all do. Welcome to the FT. Thank you all for coming tonight. We've got a great panel here of people from across the FT to talk to you about their careers and answer as many questions as you can possibly think of. So store them up as we go along and ask us at the end. I've also got some questions you've already submitted, so I shall try to be your voice if you don't want to put your hand up and ask some of the panelists. We're going to start off by talking about ourselves, how we got into where we are and our careers. So I'll start by talking about me, which Mira will probably laugh a little bit because there's a kind of humble brag in here, but bear with me because there's a reason why I'm saying what I'm saying. So I'm the deputy managing editor at the FT. And what does that mean? It means that I run the business of editorial. So I don't do the journalism itself, but I do the people, the operations, the security. It means that I am quite influential. I have a lot of authority. I can say no to things. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is because I think it's useful to say that my background is I'm an Essex girl. My dad was a Cockney, working class. I went to a not very good school. And it was the kind of school where you didn't go to university. So I didn't. So that was my background. And to this day, I have no degree. But I think it's useful to say that I have authority in the FT's newsroom, but I don't have what people traditionally might think of that you should have to enter into editorial and be someone who is powerful or makes decisions. I think that's really worthwhile thinking about because we've all got different paths. So I'm going to start by looking someone in the eye and seeing who wants to go first. I'm going to start with Nico. So Nico, tell us about your career path, why you decided on journalism, and how you're sitting on the panel now.
Yeah, it's weird to be sitting on the panel because I joined the FT in 2018 as an intern through Creative Access. So I know what it feels like to be sitting there because that was also me going to all these masterclasses about being a journalist. And I guess I knew I wanted to be a journalist ever since I was, younger. And then I went to uni and I did economics, and I had a bit of a dilemma of should I go into like banking and consulting, which all my friends were doing, but I wanted to do journalism, and I applied to Creative Access and I got this internship. So I guess we're talking about our career paths, right? So I started here in 2018 as an intern on the money desk. So that was writing about personal finance and mortgages and investing and saving, those sorts of things. And then so that was a 6-month-long internship. And after that, I managed to stay for another 6 months with Abby's blessing as a trainee on the markets desk. And after that, I applied for the official FT graduate scheme, so the Paul McLean graduate scheme. And I did that for 2 years. So that's a great scheme where you do 2 years worth of 6-month rotations. And one of those rotations is always broad. So I went to New York for 6 months, which was really amazing. And I covered COVID and vaccines and Moderna and Pfizer. It was in April 2021. So I did that for 6 months. And then I sort of managed to stay in New York for another 9 months or so. And I did a maternity cover covering deals and Elon Musk buying Twitter and SPACs. And then I came back just this summer and have now started the job on the screen, which basically entails covering crypto, which is, I think, a great time to be doing that because it's all crazy and there's so much shady people. But that's a sort of brief run through of me at the FT, I guess.
So if you want to know how crypto and blockchain works, Nico is here to answer all of those questions. Do you think you would start at the FT if it wasn't for Creative Access? What?
I'd like to say yes, and I remember we had this conversation when I started actually, and when I was an intern, that there was a perception of the FT brand being very sort of, it's read in the city and it's read by people who work in finance, and all those people are typically sort of older and white and male. And I guess, yeah, going into it, starting here, I knew of the reputation of the FT. I mean, I didn't read it growing up. We couldn't pay for the subscription, but there was this perception that it was very sort of older and white and male, but working here is quite different to that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Murad, tell us about yourself.
Okay, now that Nikki's told the story, I realise I'm going to try and be as fast as possible. So, when I was around 12, the Times newspaper went to 20p, and that was a big thing. I could never afford it, and I got £1 pocket money from my parents. I went to a state school in inner city London, and that meant I could read a broadsheet newspaper every day. And I didn't realise that it was incredibly good training, but because by the time I got to uni, I did law at university and absolutely hated it. But I was doing it like good Asian boy, become a lawyer, accountant, all of that stuff. You've all heard that. But I was training to become a lawyer and loathed it. So I did student journalism. Joined the local the student newspaper, ended up starting a magazine with the newspaper and all this stuff. And I was doing all this other stuff, which was really good for applying to newspapers. And I applied to the Times traineeship. And when I went into an interview, I was told I was the youngest person that they were interviewing for the job and the least experience, but they were kind of interested in all the stuff I'd done as student journalism. And I could name their correspondence going back 10 years in different jobs because I'd been reading the newspaper for that long, and that I didn't realize I had gone through that level of training for the job that I was really, should be doing. So I did that. The one thing you should know about that, there was an interim period where I applied and got the Scott Trust bursary, which is through the Guardian, and they fund a postgraduate degree. I did the postgraduate degree at Goldsmiths in journalism, and at the end of that got the Times traineeship as well. And without all of those kind of weird confluence of events, but definitely without the bursary, I wouldn't be a journalist today for sure. At the end of the traineeship, they said, "Well done, you've done well enough to get a job. How about technology?" I said, "Is there anything else?" And they said, "How about technology?" And so I was a technology reporter there for 4 or 5 years, which at the start of it was a kind of backwater thing for the Times. Internet is a fad. Twitter didn't exist. The iPhone had just come out. By the end of it, it was covering Silicon Valley and how Silicon Valley was changing the world, essentially. And because of my reporting on that, Alec Russell, who was then head of news, who's the FT weekend editor, currently gave me an interview, and he started doing this series of coffees with me every 6 months, where I would be summoned and didn't know really why I was having this chat with this very powerful person at the FT, a place I really, really wanted to work. And then lo and behold, eventually a job opens up. They actually created a role, and I applied for it and got that role, but that took 18 months of talking. So I did tech, and then just before the 2016 Rio Olympics, the job associated to that, which is, I won't go into that too much, opened up, and I emailed Alec immediately as I saw that and said, "Can I apply for that role?" He said, "I think that's a good idea." And I went and covered the Rio Olympics, and slowly that job turned into the sports correspondent and the sports editor of the FT, covered 2 Olympic Games, the Euros, the Cricket World Cup. Fantastic time. And then I got called in at the end of the Tokyo Olympics by Ruler and said, "Enough of your fun, come and be the tech editor," which is the job I currently do, which is coordinating all the global coverage of tech, from Elon Musk buying Twitter to everything that's happening with Apple, to we've got a team in San Francisco, in London, in China, covering all the global trends.
not too long. That was good. We're going to come back to coffees and networking because we talk about this a lot. Evan, tell us about your story.
Yeah, so I'm Isan, and I started 3.5 years ago at the FT. I came in as a creative access intern, but I've been sort of around journalism for a lot longer than that. I knew I wanted to be a journalist when I was about maybe 11 or 12, and we had this like class assignment. And the only thing I remember is like I like the news, and I used to watch the news with my grandmother all the time. So I was like, okay, I know what a journalist is, so I'm just going to put that down. And I always liked, you know, my dad when I was younger did photography and things like that. So I knew like what a photographer was, and it just all of that sort of visual kind of aspect of like the news like just really enticed me. So I went to uni in the States where I grew up, and from there I graduated, did an internship sort of freelance gig at a local newspaper. I walked into the office one day, and I was just like, okay, I'm here, I'm ready to write, you know, what do I need to do? And the guy was just, I remember he was just thinking like, who is this kid? And he was like, okay, pitch us some ideas and we'll see what you got. And so I pitched him some ideas. He didn't take it the first time or the second time, but I think on the third time, on the pitching round, he was like, okay, I think you've got something here. And so I just kind of started working with them on that. And then from there, I just kind of kept working as a freelancer. Eventually, I kind of decided to do something else. I started up a storytelling blog in Nashville, and did that for a couple of years. And then it didn't really go as I had planned. So I was just like, you know, I really need to like do something different. I really need to kind of change it up a bit. So I made the decision to come to London. My brother and sister had been in London. So that was like a big kind of push for me to come. And I did a master's, and from there I did like internships at CNN, and I did one at the Telegraph. And then I couldn't find anything for a while, and I sort of just struggled a bit in journalism. I had to work at a pub for, you know, almost 2 years, just trying to make things work, you know, freelancing and just kind of pitching ideas, having coffees, emailing people, you know, the whole networking thing with LinkedIn and everything. And then I talked to a friend of mine. I remember having coffee with a friend of mine who also did the course with me. And she was telling me about creative access. And by that time, I was like sort of already at like my end. I remember telling her, I was like, I'm about like a couple weeks away from, you know, maybe deciding to go back home to Bermuda, just because, you know, funds were running out and things like that. And she was like, try creative access. She was like, I know, you know, you've already like applied for tons of jobs, but creative access is really good. And she had gotten an internship at The Guardian, I think, at the time. So that was like really encouraging. So I think the next night, or the night after I applied, I logged into Creative Access, and I saw a job as a picture editor, and I was just like, okay, this sounds like a bit of me. Like I like photography, I like, you know, the journalism side of it. I'd never been a picture editor before, didn't really even know what it meant, but the job description looked good, and so I applied and got the job, and did 6 months of an internship, stayed on as a trainee, and then a full-time member of staff after that. So yeah, 3.5 years later, here I am.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Good for us. We're hearing a lot of creative access success stories. Are you counting the coffees? Because it's coming up a lot, isn't it? Yasser, tell us about your path.
It's a slightly, I mean, very similar, but also quite different. I've been with the FT for 1.5 years. I head up diversity and inclusion here. Have worked in the space for D&I for about 18 years. But if I were to take a step back, and just chiming in what John said at the beginning, as someone who grew up with so many intersectional diverse identities, excuse me, but I'll probably end up ticking a lot of boxes. So single parent, working class, gay, disability, looking after a parent with severe mental health issues. I have to admit, I super struggled with just being myself, authentic self, and understanding how that played out. So I I struggled at school and college, managed to scrape 2 U's and an E at A levels. And then I went to university to try to get onto a degree course there. And there's a system called clearing, which I think happens now. And I had this interview, and the person interviewing me said, I've just rejected someone who's got 6 points. You've got 2 points. Why the hell should I let you in? And I said, look, I just need an opportunity to do something. So I got into a H&D for the first time. Probably really felt like I had to work really hard to get onto the degree course that I wanted to do. And then I started off as a positive action trainee. So I had an opportunity to it's kind of similar to Creative Access. I started off as a positive action trainee to then, to comply with or to help organizations comply with the then 2010 Equality Act. So very much in the voluntary sector, public sector, managed to apply for a job at The Guardian on a 6-month contract to help the board identify some objectives around equality and diversity back then. It was a very different world. The EDI world was very different then. I was really fortunate because that 6 months stayed to 6 years. So I was there for 6 years. And in that time, really was such an amazing place to help build me personally and being my authentic self, because it's the first time I came out, and also really worked on helping diversify the workforce, but also ended up being commissioned by Janine Gibson, who's our editor here, to write my first piece for The Guardian. So I wrote a piece when I was out in India, and it was just a really brilliant experience. I call myself a jack of all trades and an expert in nothing, because I feel like I've just managed to be very fortunate just to take opportunities when they come. So I spent 6 years at The Guardian, heading up D&I there. Spent a time at Channel 4, led D&I for Channel 4, BBC Studios. And I was actually at BBC Studios for a stint, very happy there. And then this role at the FT came up. And I thought, now's my chance. Either I take it or I don't, and it's someone else is going to take it. And the reason why I'm with the FT is because many, many years ago, as I was working at The Guardian, I thought I'd love to work for the FT because it just felt a place which is something for everyone, in that it's very much around, as John says, holding power to account. And it just felt like it was a space that would be for everyone. So fortunate enough I applied, or fortunate for me, I managed to get in. So that's my career story.
Fabulous. So let's give you the benefit of our wisdom and the mistakes that we've made that we would like to tell you about, or so you can avoid them. Mirad, what would you tell your younger self to not to do, or to do, or something that you wish you hadn't done, or you wish you had done?
So first of all, don't tell yourself that you're lucky to be in the place.
Yeah.
And this came up in an earlier discussion, and I spent a lot of time at the Times telling myself I was very lucky to get a job there and get the traineeship there, and that the fact that I was being paid so poorly was fine because I'm really lucky to be there. Actually, I got there on merit, and I worked really hard to improve over time. And when opportunities were coming up and I wasn't being able to move on to things that I wanted to do, that was a structural issue within the newspaper. And it took me some time to get to grips with the idea that you have to have some agency in your own career and sort that out for yourself, hence the coffees. So I was somebody now, the comment editor of the FT now is Alice Fishburn, who weirdly took my job, my first job at the Times, and she's become comment editor of the FT. And I was moaning about some moves and why things weren't happening, and she said pointedly, "But you're not really doing anything about it. You're complaining, but you're not doing anything about it." And that triggered me to, instead of waiting for Alec to send me a message, to say to Alec, "Hey, how about we meet up?" And that was the crucial thing that triggered more conversation. So you have to take agency. You have to try and organize your own career, and say explicitly to people what you want in a polite way, in a way that they can hopefully advocate for you. And if you do that, things tend to move much faster, I've found since.
Yeah, that's very true. I spend a lot of my day talking to people across editorial, and there's nothing worse than someone who expects you to help them with their career and completely, like, what's my next job going to be? You know, obviously I can try and support and help people, but you do need to decide for yourself, you know, what is it you want to do? How are you going to make it happen?
And take risks and accept that it's fundamentally it's an unstructured profession. There is no set career path. Opportunities come up, you put your hand up. If you're that sort of person, you'll tend to thrive.
Yeah. Okay. What mistakes have you made, or what advice would you give your younger self?
I would go back to 21-year-old Niku, and I would give her a slap for the interview that I did at the Times. You just reminded me. So when I was applying for internships after graduating, I interviewed at the Times, The Economist, and the FT. And my interview at the Times was probably the worst thing I've ever done.
Why?
Because I went in there, and the editor was asking me about sort of which journalists at the Times do you read and do you like, and who do you want to, you know, emulate, and I had no answers. I did such little research, and I just thought that my sort of knowledge of economics and business and finance would sort of carry me through. But 21-year-old Niku needed to have like researched the place that she was applying to. And when I then got the internship at the FT, I remember you and Claire, the editor that hired me, said that there were people who did master's programs who'd applied, and I got it sort of instead of them. And I was really thankful for myself, because when it came to the FT interview after the Times, I researched, you know, what Claire was doing, what she was writing about, the 3 pictures for the stories and things to write. And yeah, research the place that you're applying to, you know, the desk that you're applying to, who's writing there, what they're writing about, how long they've been there, you know, what the types of stories are that the Times writes compared to the FT, those sorts of things. That was probably like the biggest mistake I've ever made. Yeah.
And that's probably true outside of journalism.
Yeah.
If you're going for an interview, you should know where you're going.
Yeah.
Definitely stalk people on Twitter and whatever social we're actually using now. Ethan?
Yeah, I mean, I can echo that. Like, do your research, you know, even when it comes to sort of the production side of things, like, you know, what kind of images that, you know, to particular newspapers or news outlets use, or what kind of, you know, descriptions they use, captions they use, like little things like that. The details make all the difference. And so definitely brush up on your things. I mean, I remember, like, I've had plenty of interviews that I didn't get. And, you know, a lot of it did come down to just not, you know, preparing that well. And eventually something clicked in my head, and I was like, okay, like, I need to just, you know, do more research and kind of dive deep into things. And then I would always say, like, just be as flexible as possible. You know, take risk, do things that, you know, you might not be sure about, but just, you know, kind of maybe put yourself into it, and then you'll learn, and you'll see, you know, nothing is forever. So if you decide, you know, in a couple weeks, in a couple months, you know, in a couple of years, the older you get, that it's not for you, you can always kind of change your path around. So yeah, just be as flexible as possible, which I know can be very hard to do, especially if you have like a very certain like goal that you want to get to. But yeah, like it was said before, it's, you know, it's a very unstructured kind of industry. So you kind of have to just carve out your own way and just do it yourself.
Any other top tips that you would tell your younger self?
Yeah. What else would I tell myself? Always iron your shirts. Make sure you look good. Make sure you're nice and smiling and ready for interviews. Yeah, and that,
be nice
like,
to the receptionist.
Be nice to everybody. Be nice to everybody. Yeah. I think that's about
iron
it.
your shirt. That's not a bad one.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Something similar to Niku, really. I just would tell myself to probably get over yourself. You're there for a reason, and to show up as your full self. Because I think if you don't, you're having 2 battles. You're battling yourself, and then you're battling what's in front of you, be it an interview or your colleagues or work environment. And that's what often leads to being misunderstood. You're not being your full authentic self. So whatever that is, that having that self-confidence and self-worth, that you're there for a reason. And you know, just show up in your full self, because I think for me that played out in very uncomfortable ways, because I'm actually quite a natural introvert, and I had such a I had a perception of being quite a cocky extrovert, and inside I'm like this. I'm super underconfident. I need to show more to be more confident, and that actually just translated into being really cocky and maverick. So then it plays out in even worse ways, because the way people are responding to you is just that you kind of need help bolstering up as opposed to being pushed back down into your place.
Yeah, I am a cocky extrovert, so there's that. Although to be fair, when I first walked into a newsroom when I was 23, without a degree, as I've said, and no knowledge of, it was chance. I got sent by an agency to the FT first time round. I didn't know that, you know, people didn't have degrees or didn't do all of these things, so I didn't know to be any different. So they took me as they got me. It's not done me too badly so far, as long as I can survive tonight by giving you advice. Okay, we've talked about coffees and networking, but we are going to move on to this, I promise. But there's quite a few questions that you put in some of you had submitted about how you get into the industry. So are there particular things that you think people should do, courses or experience, you know, that you think either you or you think would serve people well? Who wants to take that one?
I think maybe just get as much experience as you can, whatever that looks like, you know. I mean, a lot of things are transferable, and build as many skills as you can. For me, it was photography. So I learned sort of InDesign and Photoshop and Lightroom, which I think now Adobe has like student discounts and things like that, which is great. So just for me, it was about like gaining as much skills as I could, because it made me stand out as a picture editor who had, you know, a wide variety of skills, and who had a wide variety of interests as well. So read up on, you know, all the things that you're interested in and do your research, and then just gain as much skills as possible, you know. And just try to just get out there and just try to do it, you know. If like, I guess, you know, start with what you have, you know, and start where you are, and then from there you can kind of just, you know, expand. Sometimes you have to start small, and that's okay. But you just keep going and keep pushing, and the more you do it, the more experience you'll get in it, the better you get at it. Progress makes, you know, practice makes progress. So.
Yep. Yeah, so what about outside of journalism? Obviously, you see quite a lot in your role in the talent teams. Are there things that you think are common that you could give advice to people thinking about at the beginning of their careers?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I would say really make sure your LinkedIn profile is like fully updated, up to scratch. And I would say I see it as this, I would love to work for a certain organization. I'd start following people and connecting people who work there. As Isan says, really do your research, get to know the organization. Just think of, if I were to ask you in 2 years' time or 3 years' time, what's your desired role and desired company you want to work for? And then you work backwards. Ironically, I mean, more often than not, if you just reach out to someone on LinkedIn that you're interested in, maybe doing their role one day, or just interested in the function or the department of the organization, you just sort of just send out loads of messages, you'll get a response, and someone will, maybe 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 will have a coffee with you, invite you in, and things just to take shape that way. I think probably have a really curious mind, and just know, if you know your subject area, if you become an expert in a particular subject area, whether that's via social media or blogging, or just looking at seeing what others write about and having an opinion on it, which is slightly different. I think that's a really good way in, and you know, so many networking opportunities now. So LinkedIn I think it's a good place to start to do your research.
Yeah. Murad?
Well, speaking from a reporter's point of view, I think we have to admit and to say that like, Abby, your story is rarer and rarer in this world. When I first started in newspapers, it wasn't actually that rare. People went straight into the trade. They went to local newspapers, and they made their way up international newspapers, and that's it's become a much more I don't know what the right word is. Professionalize is not the right word, but it's kind of a little bit more standardized entry. So I would really consider some sort of postgraduate degree or training, because it gives, I think one thing, the training always helps if done well. In particular, the legal training is really just absolutely crucial for young people to understand that actually you could get sued into oblivion if you write the wrong thing, and know what to look for. It's actually really important. It helps you build a network of people, because I'm still in touch with quite a few people that did the same postgraduate course, and suddenly you're helping each other out. Things that are tips of where you should be applying for, when the traineeship applications come in, where all of that stuff helps as well. And it shows a level of seriousness. It's as in, this isn't something that you're playing with. You're all in for this career that you want to go for. It's journalism for you, because there are just so many people trying to break their way into journalism. I mean, look at the room right now. That you need to show that, right, this is something that you're taking the risk for. This is something that you really, really, really want, because there are hundreds of other people that really do want it, and are doing the courses and doing the stuff that you need to at base level to build that foundation.
Right. I was just thinking about bursaries and things then. I mean, definitely there are lots of different ways to get training that if you can't afford it, you can find someone that might be able to support you. I'm sure the Creative Access team can help you with finding people. One that pops to mind that the FT funds is the Journalism Diversity Fund, which supports training for NCTJ courses. That's an accredited journalism courses. So that's one off the top of my head, but there are others. Niku?
Well, as someone who didn't do any of those sorts of courses, no, I just got an internship straight out of uni. No. As someone who did no postgrad, I just did economics degree, and then I applied and through Creative Access got the FT internship. I would say what Isan said of if you want to be a journalist, do the journalism. Like at uni, I was in the uni magazine. There was an economic society magazine I was writing for. There was another sort of emerging markets economic society thing that I was writing for. And that's what I talked about in my interview with you and Claire, just what I'd done and why I found it interesting and what I wanted to do more of. That's all I can say really. Just as much experience in whatever you could do, freelance shifts, or if you do sort of uni journalism, whatever you can do, just so you have some sort of portfolio to talk about when you're in an interview.
Yeah. Now let's get on to networking and coffees, because it's come up every single time we've spoken, and it's Mirad and I's favourite subject. So talk about coffees.
Well, look, so networking gives an idea that you're supposed to be constantly out at events every night, and it's something out of like La La Land, or I don't know if you've all seen that scene.
Champagne.
Yeah, and just you're meeting lots of people. That's not when you go, you'll all be doing internships and you'll be meeting people in the industry, and there's absolutely no harm of keeping in touch with those people over time, and being friendly and saying, can you meet for a coffee, and can you meet for lunch, and all this stuff. I've got a basic thing of like paying it forward now, because there was a lot of people early in my career who did all that for me. I didn't realize that that's what they were doing, but they realized that there's a whole group of young people that they were helping out. They were giving good advice to, they were connecting with other people. Alec Russell was one of them. Alice Fishman was another one. They're both at the FT now. And I try and do that now, as reasonably as I can, given the time constraints. So if you go and do an internship with an editor that you really like, don't let that be the end of the conversation. Like, get in touch with them, stay in touch with them. They're the ones who have the intel of whether jobs are going or not, what's coming up. And that to me is networking. That's just generally being interested and keeping in touch with a greater group of people over time, and just being somebody that they would want to have a coffee with goes a long way.
Yeah. when I was thinking about preparing for tonight, I was thinking about the fact that you need to believe in yourself. But the reason that I'm here is because other people also believed in me. And they either would have coffee with me or they supported me and gave me advice. And you're in a room full of people that can be your network, can be your support, not just us on here, and Creative Access, but all of you in this room. So utilize that and use that support, because you never know when you're going to need it. Coffees, networking, top tips. The top tips for networking came up quite a few times, but I think to Muriel's point, people are thinking like a room full of people. But what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, coffees are really important. And I you know, like you guys were saying, I had very senior people when I first started at the FT and being like, oh, we should go for coffee and things like that. And I'm like, yeah, sure. I was saying yes to everybody and just like super nervous going in and like, well, I don't know what they want to talk to me about. But it's just like a very casual thing. It doesn't have to be this very serious, you know, conversation of like, this is what I want to do, this, and this. You can just have a conversation, have a chat with them, you know, be very personable and just kind of like get to know people, you know, professionally through having coffees and just chatting with them. And then you build networks with people like that, you know, and they know someone who can put you in touch with someone else. I've met photographers like that, illustrators like that we use all the time now. Freelancers and other people like that. So it's, you know, the most, if you can broaden your network out the best just by like, you know, just going for coffees or going for a drink or something like that, then it's great. It's a good network to kind of have to rely on when you need it.
Nicky, you're a reporter, so you should be like gold star A person at this. What tips do you have for thinking about this? Are you a people person?
Well, you're kind of going off what Isan said. You sometimes, at least in my career, I've found people who aren't necessarily my direct editor or my direct line manager, but they're a person who is happy and open to talk to me about sort of both day-to-day work and a sense check, but also like, oh, I'm thinking of applying for this job. What do you think? Do you think it's the right thing for me? And like, there's someone at the FT who is not a senior editor by any means, but is a great journalist. And I sort of go to him for, hey, what do you think about this? Or what should I do? And I think those people just sort of appear naturally in the course of your career. And if you realize you have a relationship and they're talking to you about their careers or they're giving you advice, don't be shy to go to them and ask for advice, because they'll be more than happy to give it to you. Not necessarily, you don't necessarily directly work with them, but if you have that sort of easy relationship, then go to them and just build on that.
So do you have a cabinet of people that you go to for advice?
I'm actually terrible at networking, so I'm going to give you advice to try to do it in a way which also speaks to the introverts, because I mean, to your point, actually, it's really often most people are there to help. So if you would go with a help, I have a challenge, I have a problem, and just go to people with a specific ask, and then that's a really great way to connect. And then what you do after that, to Isan's point, is to keep that connection there. What I used to do is I used to hate big networking events. I used to have a look at the list of 100 people and be like, okay, who do I need to get someone's card, and think of the 1 or 2 people, and then go to the event, target them, get their cards, and I would run. I would leave, because then I thought, okay, it's better that I connect with one person or maybe 2 people that is really useful to connect with, rather than just trying to go talk to everyone. Now, the benefits of talking to everyone is you really hone in on those skills of small talk, because small talk's quite tough and it's an art. And sometimes, has anyone ever been in a situation where you're talking to someone, you want to talk to someone, and all of a sudden they introduce you to someone else and then they disappear? And you're thinking, what happened there? That's actually a real sort of good art of someone who's probably quite well known, has a lot of people approaching them. So it's about finding a way, and what's that little segue in to connect with them. And often when you have read something they've written, or making a particular comment which is a little bit different to someone else, and you get their attention. So there's always little tricks. Loads of groups on LinkedIn as well, so join. And there's also loads of groups on WhatsApp. So if you can obviously get connected, then you can, you know, get connected with people online as well. It's not just always in person.
No, not always in person.
Am I giving bad advice?
No, not at all. No, I think it makes perfect sense to me. I think what I'm hearing as well is you have to practice it. It doesn't come naturally to anybody to talk to someone you don't know. It is quite hard. It may be harder if you're more on the sort of introverted scale, possibly, you know, but with if you practice it, you can get better at it. I'm sure there's probably a list of questions we could work out between us to share with you, but the other thing that comes up quite strongly is rejection. Now, you know, we've talked, and Mirad has just talked about, you know, applying, and you're one of lots of people. So maybe Mirad, you start with you. How many jobs did you apply for? And how do you, what's the best way of dealing with rejection and keep going if that's what you're going to experience?
Right. So for weird reasons, that Times traineeship was the only thing I applied for, and one way or other banged into it. Partly because the kind of being young, you don't realise that was something that could happen. But when I got in, I was pretty frustrated. I applied for 8 or 9 different jobs within the Times, and was never moved, as a combination of, well, what you're doing now is fine, and you know, that'd be a problem that we'd have to fix. But also, we're not quite sure that you're good enough to do this sort of thing. That in retrospect, you can be honest with yourself, and that was the reputation. So you've got to find a way out, and you've got to sort of organize that yourself. But rejection is like just a basic form of journalism anyway. You're gonna have to. So I'm an editor now, and reporters come to me every day, and most of the time I'm really excited by what they say. But if I'm not, then, I mean, it's part of the process of what you have to get into. You have to have a thick skin. No is not a personal thing. It's because of the merits of what you're talking about, what the story is, what the pitch is not good enough. And so you have to work out, well, why is that a no? Why has it got to the point of, it hasn't really even got off the ground? And actually, the more time that you spend in the trade, you work out the formula of, right, these are the things that the FT is interested in. And I think the same thing can happen for jobs and as well. Like I think people were talking about researching and preparing. Well, in my current job, sometimes we do job interview processes, and you can tell the difference between somebody who has researched the FT, who has researched me, who has researched our recent stories, who's really worked out how to pitch themselves forward, and their CV looks different. I'm sure that they're molding their CV and their job application for every single one. It's basic journalistic skills, research, being able to put a narrative onto a piece of paper. It's the same thing, it's storytelling of a different kind. And it's something that you should learn and try and adapt to. Rejection is not a bad thing, it's not personal. You just have to keep going.
Okay, do you agree?
Yeah, definitely on the, like, my Times story. I mean, I was so horrified at myself after that interview that when I had my FT interview, I was like deeply stalking Claire and everything she was writing and the money section. Just, yeah, it's not a bad thing and it's not personal. And it's, yeah, in my experience, it's hard. You know, we'll sat here like rejection is great. It's not, it's awful and it's hard. But as long as you learn something from it and you actually actively really properly use that in your next interview or your application or your cover letter, whatever it is, that's the only way you're going to progress and then go forward.
So is feedback the key to dealing with rejection as well? So you know what you did wrong or what you could improve?
You're not going to get feedback. Not all the time. You're going to just be met with silence.
Is that true?
For jobs?
Yeah.
A lot of the time, yeah.
Yeah, true.
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah. So how do you deal? So if you're going to get silence because you're not going to get feedback, how do you deal with rejection then?
It's, you know, like Nick, you said, it's hard. You just kind of, sometimes you just need to take a break, you know. If it gets to be too much and you're just, you know, you're applying for a lot of different things and it's just not working out, sometimes you just need to take a break, do something different, you know, for, I don't know, like a week or something, and then just get back into it. You know, it's about persevering and getting back into it and crafting, like it was said earlier, crafting, you know, your different pitches and yourself differently to different organizations and making sure your goals are aligning with their goals and you're matching up and you're syncing. everything correctly. But yeah, it's hard. I went through years of like trying to break into journalism, you know, full time, and the rejection was hard, and I had to take a break. You know, I couldn't afford, you know, to keep pushing and do it. And you know, I had to take a job at a pub. I've worked in restaurants. I've worked in, you know, numerous different like cafes and things like that. And you just, you know, you persevere, you know, when you can, and that's it. And
Well,
you just
you're here
kind
now.
of, yeah, hope something works. And yeah, it does eventually.
Can I emphasize that we've made that sound really dreary and hard?
Sorry, yeah.
But actually, you do work out the formula.
You do.
That is the thing about doing this, like story pitches and job applications. What you do is you do learn from each one, and then the reception rate gets better and better and better, and that's how you improve. So just what you have to remind yourself is that it's a kind of cycle of improvement that you're going through. And as long as you're trying to learn from the last experience, then hopefully you can progress to something where it becomes just a reflex, where you instinctively know, right, that's the job that I know I could do, or that's a story I know I can write and will be something that I can press forward for.
Yeah.
Well, I
You
suppose
gain-
sorry,
I was just going to say, you gain more confidence in yourself as well. So you're able to kind of spot things out, you know, what you're able to do, and kind of you recognize things very early on. The more you're able to do it, the more you pitch, the more interviews you have, you do better at it, you have more confidence. And yeah.
That's true with interviews. Yeah, definitely. Practice makes perfect.
Just and also to John's point earlier, if you really love what you do, then you're going to be passionate, and you would have done your research, and you would have probably that would come across. And also timing is a key one. I would say the timing, because you know, you've got to be on the pulse. Someone could get in there just before you, so it could be a brilliant pitch or an idea. It's been covered or covered elsewhere, or something. You know, what's your vantage point on that as well?
Yeah. Well, and you've all got creative access to ask as well. So if you have got someone you can give that can give you feedback. The other like practical things that I see constantly is cover letters that clearly have been written 1,000 times. So they're not specific to the job you're applying for. They're not specific to the company you're applying for. And sometimes I get quite often the Times, which is a different newsroom. It's a different news organisation completely. So, you know, do think about, if you're getting rejections constantly, think about what you're doing. There may be something that you can mix up and change that hasn't been working, but also go to the team and get some feedback. We're right on, aren't we? So yes, we're going to get questions from you now. So rather than listening to my voice, let's hear from your voices, what you would like to know about the FT or careers. You've got a panel of different jobs and backgrounds here. So put your hand up if you want to ask a question.
Hi, thank you so much for what you said so far. It's been really, really informative. My question is, once you're settled in the job that you're doing, you're established there, you're working at it, you know what you're doing, how do you stop yourself from stagnating in that area?
First of all, I'd like to say no one really knows what they're doing. So don't believe anybody that looks like they've got it all under control. No matter what stage you get to, we're all still trying to figure it out and pretend that we know what we're doing. Just that would be my first point.
I don't know if I'm the right person to answer, because I've just done sort of maybe more. I don't know,
Are
because I've done like
stagnating?
internships. And, well, I've done like rotations.
Really interesting.
Yes, but it's been on rotation. So I did sort of the grad scheme was 6 months and then you move, and 6 months and then you move. So this is my first sort of permanent. Yeah.
Have you stagnated?
Abby and I are going to have a
We're
meeting
gonna have a
next week,
coffee.
or I'm told you're stagnating now. No, I think two things. Like, the basic journalistic instinct comes from curiosity. You're curious about the world. You're curious about everything around you, and you're nosy enough and don't care about privacy enough to tell those stories. It's kind of weirdly amoral, but that's how it goes. So if you're that sort of person, you will kind of care about what more than one story. You will want to do other things within the trade. And a lot of people have asked me, why on earth did I give up covering sport and being the sports editor of the FT? because I kind of weirdly know that's probably the best job I'll ever have, is because there are other stories out there. There are other things that going on, and you want to be part of that. So if you have that basic curiosity about the world, I don't think you could ever really stagnate within journalism, because there's so many other things you could do. You should be able to get curious about almost any. I mean, I can really genuinely imagine myself doing most beats at the FT, because it's learning, it's storytelling fundamentally. And then the second thing is, like, you have the thing about agency. You have to take agency. Like, if you get into an organization, if you're not going to someone like Abby and saying, I would like this or this or this in the future, how do I go about getting it? Not saying give it to me, saying how do I go about getting to that stage, then you're doing it wrong. There are a whole load of people who know the pathways, and you need to ask them. You need coaches, you need people that will help guide that.
I was just going to say, I think one of the beautiful things about being at the FT and news in general is that it's a pretty collaborative working environment, especially at the FT. And so you do have a chance to kind of work with different teams. You're introduced to a lot of different things, and you can kind of, if you do find yourself feeling stagnated, there's always something else that kind of, catches your eye, or something else that you might be interested in, and kind of helps working with, big teams and different teams on things. Because then you kind of know more of, like, the organization, and you're able to kind of figure out, okay, I've done this for a little while now. What do I want to do next? And I think it helps with the collaborative environment that we work in.
It's not a competition with JK, and I can say this now that he's left, but editorial is far bigger. So you can move around more. There's 600 people globally, 3 different newsrooms, 40 different bureaus. So obviously I'm slightly biased now that John's gone. Yes, sir?
I mean, what's been highlighted is very specific to the world of journalism, which is brilliant. A former boss of mine once said, never stay at an organization for more than 5 years, but then, it just depends on the nature of your role. So I guess if you're working in a non-editorial part of the business, and then maybe that would apply, but staying curious is going to be the thing that's going to, you just follow your nose and you'll find something within.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you. So I just want to ask, would you recommend us to, like, practice our skill to focus on one topic of news writing, such as focus on energy or like the company, or it's better to try a wide range of news story writing? And I also want to know, if we can't get into this kind of graduate scheme, in the future, it's really hard to get back as a professional experience candidate. Thank you.
I'll take the first part of that question and say that I can't really answer that for you. I think you'd have to figure out, what are you reading more about, whether it's energy or pharmaceutical news, like what you are drawn to reading about and therefore want to write about or want to know more about. And I think that would be my starting point about what you want to do, is what you're naturally drawn to, because that's, like Moira was saying, the curiosity, that's what you're interested in. Yeah.
Don't pigeonhole yourself, though. I would say maybe at the beginning of your career, you can do many different things. And Mira will always say he obviously mentors more the writers, but we can probably teach you to write about certain subjects. But if you don't have the appetite to be a journalist, to be a reporter, and to be hungry, and that's quite hard to teach. Whereas climate or energy or any other beat, we can probably guide you. And your second question, I've forgotten, it was.
So if we can't get into this graduate
Right.
opportunity in the future, it's harder to come back as experienced candidates.
Okay. Do you want to talk about that?
I think if you don't get something, just keep applying, and maybe ask for like a work experience, or like a different internship somewhere else, or just have it goes back to networking and things like that. Just if you can, the best way that you can sort of pivot yourself and just make sure that you're still sort of active in the industry, and like if you have a portfolio of work, even if you have to just go out and do it like on your own, doing a couple interviews and writing stories up, and just so you have something, then yeah, I think if you can kind of keep pushing that way, and then just try to network and keep applying for things, then yeah.
I'm going to embarrass Niku, but the year that Niku joined the graduate scheme, 1,400 people applied, and she was one of two or three that year. Yeah. So the numbers of people on graduate programs is relatively small, not just at the FT, any of them, but the number of internships and work experience placements and other things that are available are far greater. So you should definitely apply for the graduate program, but try lots of other things, like he's been saying, so that you're spreading your opportunities as far as possible.
Also remember that media is a really crowded place. There are, the FT, big institution, but there are so many different media organizations, small and big, different tones, covering lots of different things, particularly online. Like, just find your way into lots of different places that you think you can learn, that you'd enjoy working.
Trade publications. People don't often think about trade publications.
So many people come through. I mean, like we sent recently to San Francisco Tabby Kinder, who's one of our absolute stars, to be West Coast financial editor, and she started at The Lawyer or something like that. And just really learned the hard, from the ground up. There's EMAP, there's everything from Vice to Semaphore to Tortoise. There's loads of places. You should just think really widely. Do not have a narrow conception of what a career could be.
And then you should also email Adele, who's at the back, who does all that work experience and internship placement. So bombard her afterwards. We've got a couple of hands here.
Hello, hi.
Hi.
So I've rather seen that that a CV doesn't do justice to your profile rather than an in-person conversation. So how do you fill in that gap? Because often a person applies for jobs via websites and these things. So he fills in a CV and maybe a cover letter. But I think through personal experience, I've realized it doesn't do justice as much. So what could a person do?
Yes, sir. We'll start with you.
So, on your CV, I mean, a lot of people put their pictures up, and they, in that little paragraph at the beginning, try to, if you can, have something in there that really speaks to you and what you stand for in terms of your values and your personality, and then the rest in terms of the CV will flow through. It's a tricky one because you've got to put yourself across on 2 pages when people are probably seeing many CVs. But first and foremost, have your picture on there. I think it'd be a good one.
Controversial.
Yeah, it is controversial.
That answer.
Yeah, authentic songs.
Anyone else? CVs? I mean, it's a bit difficult in journalism because actually you have something else. If you're writing or you're producing something, you've also got something else to put out there about yourself. You may have something you've written or something you've produced or taken photography. But I suppose that could probably apply to other things. I mean, the one thing I would say about cover letters, I've read a lot of cover letters that say, "Dear Abby, I'm applying for this job. I think I'm a brilliant team player, but I can also work on my own, and I think I'd be great for your job." Well, I mean, that doesn't say anything about you, does it? And it actually says exactly the same as everyone else has said. So maybe think about your cover letter as well and what you include in it, bit of personality, because whilst your CV might be very kind of dry, your cover letter could give a flavour.
The best cover letter I read in the last year just read something like, "I'm applying for this job. I broke this story, this story, this story. In short, I bring in scoops." That was it.
There you go.
And we gave that person an interview. They didn't get the job, but that for other reasons. But the cover letter was fantastic.
Yeah.
So the reason why that cover letter worked is because that's what we're looking for. We were looking for a scoop-getting reporter with some background in doing that, and they could point to examples. So that's an example of a concise but incredibly well-targeted letter. Somebody also realised that we were probably we read 100 applicants, and ultimately we were going to only interview just a handful of people.
Yeah. Another hand up there, a couple of hands at the back.
So you said it's good to stay open-minded within the industry. How do you like distinguish the line between like if you have varied interests, how do you distinguish the line between focusing on one aspect or still being open towards like other subjects or roles within the industry?
Nikki?
If that makes sense.
I would say when you start out, you should be open-minded because you don't know where if you know that you want to write about, I don't know, science, you can work towards that once you're sort of once you've had the training and you've got scoops in various other, you've written some great stories. It might not be about science, but you have sort of evidence of the skills that you can use to go towards that. I would say start open-minded. As long as if you have an aim, then you can work towards it once you know the people and you can network and you have the stories to prove that you're a good reporter, then you can narrow down as you go up.
I think the three most popular things that I get told by people at your stage of career: feature writer, politics reporter, investigative journalist. I hear that constantly. So, just think about how you're going to learn the craft of journalism. That would be my suggestion. But outside of journalism, maybe towards photography or pictures or visuals.
Yeah. Just kind of do what interests you and kind of whatever you're drawn to. Just kind of, just kind of dive in, I guess, and it's very easy to kind of, guard yourself off and be like, I'm only this kind of like photographer, I'm only this kind of thing. But it's nice, it makes you more well-rounded, it makes you more flexible, it makes you more employable, if you have a wide variety of skills. And then if you decide you want to specialize in something, once you have those skills, then you can do that and you have the flexibility to, if something else comes up, then they can rely on you for other things too. So it's nice to be open and to gain a lot of different skills. But once you feel like you've reached that point, then you can specialize in something else.
Yeah. Good advice. I had another question at the back there. Did you want to ask a question? You had your hand up earlier. Okay. Got the microphone just coming to you.
Thank you for that. Sorry if I'm being nosy, but I just wanted to ask, what was it about the candidate that they didn't get through, past the interview stage, especially if they were so concise and direct in their cover letter? Thank you.
Why did you reject them, Nira?
They gave a terrible interview. I mean, it was so bad.
What was bad about it, though? But genuinely,
they were at,
interviews are hard, aren't they?
They were at a trade. They were very good at what they did. They were at a very niche trade newspaper, and they couldn't work. When we asked them, we really wanted to send this person on, because we're always looking for outside talent, smart outside talent, sharp cover letter, scoops, great. Corporate experience, even better. But they couldn't get the idea that the job of the FT is to take a step back and connect the dots to the wider world. There's something in every FT story, or should be in every FT story. I will physically write them in if they're not there. We call them the nut graph. Some people call them the bollocks par. But it's the thing around par 3, 4, 5, which says this story is important because of these connected things. And the skill of an FT writer is to write the news and write everything that's going on, and then be able to take a step back and tell a reader who has no idea about the subject, this is why it's important. And that person failed the interview because they could not take the step back. They were so in the weeds of the topic. I couldn't believe that they would ever be able to take that step back and be an FT, a successful FT reporter. That's the reason why.
It's a lot to unpick from that answer, I think. We've got another question here.
Hello, I had two questions. My first question was for Niku. I just wondered what it was like working in New York, and if you could say a little bit more about what it was like working on COVID as well, and how your economics degree fitted in with that. And then my second question was about, you've talked about how like the journalism market and the media market's quite crowded. You mentioned about going for coffees with people and trying to get work experience. I wondered what your opinions are if you can't get any paid work experience without taking unpaid work experience. Do you think think that's worth doing? I know we're at an event about accessibility, or do you think it perpetuates inequalities? And what would your recommendations be? Thank you.
We've probably all got an answer to the second one, but Nikki, you're the star of the first one.
New York was amazing. It was, yeah, the best thing that I've done so far, I would say. And covering COVID, I went just as New York was opening up from lockdown, and I was covering Moderna and Pfizer and booster vaccines. And yeah, when I look back now, I'm like, I can't believe I did that. Like, I interviewed the Moderna CEO and the BioNTech CEO, and it was kind of very different at first because our New York office is much smaller than here. And yeah, it was a sort of different working lifestyle, and like the rhythm of the day is different because of the time difference. So you wake up and you've got loads of emails from London because they've already been awake. So it was
really annoying.
Yeah. But no, it was great. And covering COVID was, yeah, it was just wonderful just to be able to talk to people. And I went to Arkansas, which is this deep red southern US state, and talked to sort of deeply anti-vax, Trump supporting people who would believe in sort of all sorts of conspiracy theories. And it was something I would otherwise never do, really. I'd never really speak to people like that. So it was sort of the best of journalism, I think. Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Right. Yes, Sandra, what do you think about unpaid work experience or unpaid internships?
I mean,
does the FT do that?
So we have different, very good question. So we have different early careers programs. I mean, I think you answered the question yourself. I think it perpetuates inequalities. I think it highlights some of the challenges in terms of access to our industry. So it's a double-edged sword because crowded space, how do you get in? And then obviously showing a lot of hunger. I think there's ways in which you can come in and maybe spend some time without actually having to come in and do something which you all benefit from and you don't benefit from. So I think there's a halfway house there.
The short answer is no, we don't. But there is a difference, as Yasser is saying, if you're just coming in for the day and following Murad round, as opposed to doing a proper placement where you're contributing to the FT, contributing to the newsroom, you know, whether it's the FT or not, I think you should be paid for work that you do. I appreciate that quite a lot of our colleagues in other newsrooms and other journalistic, more journalistic enterprises don't always pay. And I think that's a view that personally, it will be a choice you would have to make yourself about whether you think it would further your career and whether you can afford to do it. But it isn't something we'd ask you to do at the FT. That answer that? Okay. We've got time for another couple of questions. One question. Jasmine's now got to choose somebody.
No,
Yeah.
we'll do the last two.
Okay, last two. Fine.
Hi guys, my name's Osman. I'm currently a journalism coordinator at BBC Arabic. I've been there for about, I'd say, 4 months now, and this is my second stint. The first stint that I've done was more in like the logistical side, and I'm actually in like the newsroom editorial side, which is what I'm like want to be. However, I'm looking to kind of like get more into different areas of writing. So it's like I'm currently looking for like roles in like more newspapers, and like, you know, kind of wanting to kind of stretch my editorial understanding and just kind of like different styles. Now, is there a certain point where like if you could sort of see someone's CV that has a little bit too much going on, is that like, can you kind of see like that this could be potentially a hazard in terms of like maybe if they join the company they may not know what direction they want to take, or it's just like there's probably, because I can imagine with Financial Times you probably get a lot of applicants that they're very like kind of in more the same kind of direction in going down this, whereas if you're just kind of like hopping from one different form of journalism to another to another to another, is that kind of like a red flag?
There's a lot to unpack. What do you think there? Yeah. If you look at someone's CV and they've moved around a lot, do you see red flags?
Depends what it just entirely depends on what they've moved from and the reasons why they've moved. I don't mind a curious mind
as well. I think, you know,
yeah, if you skip the jobs very quickly,
yeah.
I think it's changed a lot. I mean, I think people used to like people stay in journalism for a long time in certain places, but I think that is changing quite a bit now. People move around a lot more now. I suppose if you were going from one place to another within a very short space of time, I guess I'd be asking why that was the case, not you shouldn't be seen or shouldn't be asked the question. got one. Someone else was gonna, yeah.
Hi, good evening. This is Avinash. My question is, when I want to write about a company on a cover letter, it has so many achievements and reflections and references from the company. What is it is good amount of lines or paragraphs to write about a company, and what to include in it on cover letter?
I'd definitely say less is more, because I think if you're reading a lot of cover letters and a lot of CVs, keeping it as concise and short and engaging as possible is what's going to get your attention. Because what will often happen is we go into autopilot mode and you read, and you just obviously pick out a few words. And so just concise as possible. In terms of word, no, I mean, like, in terms of the numbers of words, you know, that's up to you.
Yeah. Any more on that? No. Okay. Can we fit one more in or not? No.
No, I'm
Alright.
sorry. But we will be doing networking after, so you'll have a chance, if you grab our speakers quickly, to ask them any questions you have. I just have a few things to go over before we wrap up for today. So firstly, thank you so much to all of our lovely panelist speakers. So yeah. Some really great insights, and yeah, I hope you all took something from that. We have networking, drinks, and I believe some canapes until about 8 p.m. So please do stick around if you can. As Abby said, you're in a room full of people that could be your network, so you might want to take that advice on board, chat to people. The Creative Access team are here, the FT speakers are here, so yeah, really make the most of that. This is our final masterclass of 2022, but we'll be back next year on the 24th of January. We've got a really exclusive visit to the Victoria and Albert Museum, their Africa Fashion exhibition. So we'll share details of that soon, and we hope to see some of you there. And just finally, we'd love to see any pics you have from today. So please do follow us on Instagram, on our social media. We're _Creative Access. I think it's up on the image over there. So please do give us a follow, share how you found tonight, and we'll repost you. And yeah, please do enjoy some drinks. Thanks, everyone.
I don't know.